Okay, so this is lesson 3, other linear formulas. This is on page 7 of your notebook. And we're going to talk about a few formulas, and then we're going to do some examples. So the first formula, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And I know you've seen this before. So x1 comma y1 is coordinate 1, and x2 comma y2 is coordinate 2. So it's literally, this is just a different way to write x comma y. The reason we have a 1 and a 2 is because it's just separating the different points. So don't be confused with the little 1 and 2 down here. Oops, I didn't mean to erase that. Down here, right? This is just separating, all this is saying is this is the first point and this is the second point, okay? So, but we're still talking about x comma y. So here it says calculate the slope of a line that contains the ordered pair. So if we wanted to calculate the slope and we're given 2 points, I'm just going to zoom in here and I'm going to label. If you get confused or if you do this wrong, I would label this x1, y1 and x2, y2. And then you can plug it into this formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And I just plug in. So I know my y2 is 4. So 4 minus, my y1 is 3, all over, and then x2 is 2, minus, oops, I forgot to put a 1 there, x1 is 0. And then I just simplify. So 4 minus 3 is 1, and 2 minus 0 is 2. I can't reduce that, so that means my slope is 1/2 for these 2 points. Okay, same thing here. So I'm going to label it again. X1, y1, and x2, y2. And I'm just going to look at this formula. I'm not going to write it down again. So I'm going to say, okay, that would equal, my slope's going to equal y2 is -3 minus, now here's where this is where students mess up. Y1 is -5, right? So when we write -5, don't forget that minus right here was already in the formula, right? Y2 minus y1, and my y1 here happens to be a -5. And then over x2, which is 4, minus x1 is -2. Okay? So again, there's 2 minus. Now remember when we have two negatives next to each other, it equals a positive. And the reason for that is because this is saying the opposite of a negative, and the opposite of a negative is a positive. The opposite of a negative is a positive. Okay, so -3 plus 5 is 2, 4 plus 2 is 6, and then I'm going to simplify that. I'm going to divide by 2 because I can simplify this time. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this time my slope is 1/3. Okay, now here we're going to look at the point slope formula. So here's the point slope formula. And the thing that I want you to really understand about this is this y and this x don't change. So when we plug in, we're plugging in our slope, which is m, and we're plugging in, so I wrote it down here, m is the slope. We're plugging in the point, which is x1 comma y1. So x1 and y1 is your coordinate. So if they give you a point, that's where you're going to plug it into, is the second x and y, not the first x and y. Okay, so it says write an equation of a line with a slope m equals 1/2. So they give us our m, our slope, that passes through 8, -3. Okay, so when you're given a point and a slope, guess what formula we're using? Point slope. Okay, so this formula is called point slope. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And again, remember, I'm going to change my y1, my m, and my x1 here. So y minus, now I'm going to label this x1 and y1. So y minus, now my y1 point is -3. Okay, and that minus comes from the formula, so just drop that down. And then -3 is my y1 equals my m they gave me as well, which is 1/2. Times x minus, and my x1 is at 8. So I'm going to put a positive 8 in there. So this x1 is a positive 8, but the reason it looks like a -8 is because that formula, you bring down that negative, right? And the only other thing we're going to do is, remember when we have minus and negative, it's the opposite of a negative, which is a positive. So we're going to make that plus. Okay. Now, something to remember, change to y equals mx plus b to graph. So this is just another way to write our equation. Instead of writing it in y equals mx plus b, we can write it in point slope like this. Now, if you wanted to graph it, you can change it to this. You can also actually graph this point 3, or I'm sorry, it's actually not 3. Remember, it's -3. You can graph this point 8, -3. If you want to pull it back out, you do the opposite, right? Remember, our x1 was 8, not -8. That comes from the formula, that negative. So 8, comma, and since this is a +3, remember when we pull it out, it's the opposite, -3, right? Because that was our point originally, okay? So we could graph the point, and then we could do rise over run from there. And we're going to talk about all this, but I just wanted to remind you that that's how you could also graph it. You could change it to this, or you could use this point, and you can use this slope, and you can graph from there as well. Okay. So the last form that we're going to talk about is standard form. Actually, do we have another form? Oh no, that's it. Standard form, which is ax plus by equals c. Okay, so a, b, and c, this is a part of the formula. You have to know a, b, and c cannot be fractions or decimals. They must be integers. What is an integer? An integer is a positive or negative. Positive or negative. I'm just going to write pos or neg. Okay, for positive or negative, whole number. That's what an integer is. Or 0, but we're not going to have it be 0. Okay. So write an equation in standard form, okay, so it has to be an ax plus by equals c, for a line with this slope and a y-intercept b equals 4. So far, just to review really quick, we talked about how to find slope. So here's the formula for slope. Here's your point slope formula. When they give you a point and a slope, you want to use this. And then here's your standard form, right? Well, remember our good old friend y equals mx plus b. So if we're given an m and a b, remember b is your y-intercept and m is your slope. If you're given an m and a b, we can actually use y equals mx plus b and start there. We're going to start there, and then we're going to write it in standard form. Okay, so because this is what they give us, y equals, they give us an m, which is 2/3. And then they give us a b, which is a +4. So this right here, we're going to write it in slope-intercept, which is what this is called, okay, because we're given a slope and a y-intercept. So we're going to use slope-intercept, and then we're going to change it into this form. Now, what the heck does that even mean? That just means x and y are on the same side, and then your constant is on the right. So your constant is the number that's not x or y, which is a 4 in this case. Okay, so I'm going to move this 2/3 x to this side. So I'm going to subtract 2/3 x, and I'm going to cancel this out. Now notice I'm not multiplying or dividing here because I'm just moving it to the other side. I'm not trying to get x alone, remember? I'm not trying to get x alone. I'm trying to just move it to the other side. So -2/3 x plus y equals 4. Now this looks like ax plus by equals c, right? This is your term without an x or y. This is your ax term. A is -2/3, right? A is -2/3. It's next to the x. And technically your b is 1. But don't forget, remember our instructions down here. It says that a, b, and c cannot be fractions or decimals. They must be integers. So they have to be a whole number, okay? Well, I see a fraction on -2/3 right here. So in order to get rid of this fraction, you're going to multiply every single thing, including the 4 on the other side of the equal sign, by whatever the denominator is. So your denominator is 3, okay? So you're going to multiply everything by 3. So I'm going to multiply this by 3, this by 3, and this by 3. Okay, so watch what happens. With your fraction, this is going to cancel. So if this cancels here, it's going to be -2. Okay, but I'm going to erase the canceling part because that 3 is not canceled for everything else. So this cancels out. So we're just left with the top, which is -2, put an x on the end. Then we're going to do 3 times y, which is 3y. And then we're going to do 3 times 4, which is 12. This is in standard form because it's in ax plus by equals c. And we can name a, b, and c. A is -2, b is 3, and c is 12. Okay? So our steps here, we put it in y equals mx plus b, and then we move the x over by subtracting. Since it's a positive 2/3, we subtract 2/3 x over here. And then we have it in this form, but it has a fraction, so we multiply everything by the bottom of the fraction. Since it's a 3, we're going to multiply everything by 3. Then that way the fraction goes away, and we're just left with the top of the fraction, the numerator, which is -2. Okay? Now the next page, page 8, is talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. So there's 2 types of special lines called parallel lines and then perpendicular lines. So this is what parallel lines look like. They're never going to intersect. Actually, that looks confusing. Let's not do an arrow. Let's write they never intersect. They never intersect. Remember, intersect just means touch. So they're never going to touch. They're always going to go forever in the same direction, and they're never going to intersect. They're never going to touch. And they have the same slope. So remember, your slope is your m. They have the same m. So for example, in y equals mx plus b, let's say you had 2 lines, y equals 5x plus 6 and y equals 5x minus 1. You see how they have the same slope? That means they're going to be parallel. Remember, it's mx plus b, and this is your m in both cases. If they have the same m or the same slope, they're parallel. Okay? Now, perpendicular lines make a right angle. So they form a right angle. Now we can have a lot of other lines that intersect but don't form a right angle. You see how here that doesn't form a right angle. A right angle means that every single angle on this is a right angle. All of them, and a right angle is 90 degrees, right? So they form a right angle. That's another special line. And the slopes are opposite and reciprocal. So for example, if I had y equals 5 over 2x plus 1, something that would be perpendicular would be negative. Opposite means negative. If it's positive, it turns into a negative. And instead of 5 over 2, it's 2 over 5 x. And then it could be anything for this doesn't matter. Okay, it's just the slope. So this would be an example of perpendicular lines. So we only look at slope when we're talking about parallel and perpendicular. All right. Okay, so it says sketch the graphs. So here, look, they're going to be parallel, right? Because both of the slopes are the same, 1/2. So here's how we sketch it. We're going to start, I'm going to go up 3. Actually, I'll do 6. Hopefully my pencil's not too loud. Okay, that's not even, by the way. It should be even, but it's not. Actually, let me do this again. 5, 6. Try to make them as even as possible, but they should be, you shouldn't have to draw the rest of your graphs, okay? Yeah, there's no graphs here, but you shouldn't have to sketch the rest for your homework. Okay, I'm going to do this one first. So this tells me I'm going to go down 3 on the y-axis. So I'm going to do this one in red here. I'm going to go down 3 on the y-axis, so right here. And then my slope is rise over run. So we're going to go up 1 to the right 2. So from here, we're going to go up 1 to the right 2, and then make a point. Up 1 to the right 2, and make a point. Okay, and then you're just going to draw that line. So that's one of them. That's this one. And then the next one I'll draw in blue. My y-intercept is 2, so you're going to go up 2 on the y-axis. You'll always start here with your y-intercept. And then you're going to rise 1, run 2 again. So rise 1, run 2. So go up 1 to the right 2. Up 1 to the right 2. And this might not look parallel because, first of all, my lines aren't perfect. And second of all, I drew the graph. But these are never going to touch, okay? Because they are parallel lines, because they have the same slope. Now for this one, we're going to draw a graph again. And I'll do 6. Try to draw it a little better this time. And I want you guys to look at the slope as well. By the way, I should always label this. This is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, okay? Look at the slope here. Do you see how it's 1/2? Okay. Remember, our perpendicular lines are the opposite. So the opposite of a positive is a negative. And reciprocal, which means we're going to flip this. So instead of 1/2, it's 2/1. Well, what does 2/1 simplify to? Just 2, right? A -2. Notice that 1/2 and -2 are perpendicular. They're opposite and reciprocal slopes. So these two lines are going to form a right angle. Okay, and we're going to see that. So hopefully, if I drew the graph right. So we're going to start with the -3, and we're going to go down on the y-axis. And then we're going to rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2. Okay, that's one of my lines. Then we're going to do this one in purple. We're going to go up 2 on the y-axis. Now, if it's not a fraction, make it a fraction. So put it over 1, and we're going to go down 2 to the right 1. Down 2 to the right 1. Now, when these intersect, they're going to make a right angle. So here, oops, this is a right angle right there. Okay, so those are perpendicular lines. And we don't even have to graph it to tell. You can just tell by the slope. So always look at the number in front of x. That is your slope. And if they're the same, they're parallel. They're never going to touch, like over here. And if they're opposite and reciprocal, they're perpendicular, and they're going to form a right angle. And the last thing we're going to talk about is m equals when you have your slope equal to 0 and when you have no slope. So when you have an x equals a number, and a stands for any number. So like, let's say, for example, x equals 5. We'll put an example here so you can have some real numbers there. When x equals 5, it's going to look like a vertical line. Now remember, a vertical line looks like this. Okay? And this has no slope. Okay, y equals b. So for example, y equals 3. That would look like a horizontal line. And a horizontal line looks like this. And your slope, actually, I'm not going to do an arrow there. Slope equals 0. Okay, m equals 0. All right, so here we're going to sketch the graphs. So when x equals -3, let me draw that a little straighter here. Remember, this is my x and this is my y. This is how we're going to draw it. X is -3 is right there. And it says in my notes right here, x equals a, and remember a is any number. So here x equals -3 means it's going to be a vertical line like this, and it's going to have no slope. So at x equals -3, make a point, and then it's going to look like this, and this has no slope. Okay? Now for y equals 2, remember y is your vertical line right there. So at y equals 2, well, remember when y equals b, y equals anything, in this case y is 2, it's going to be a horizontal line like this, and your slope's going to be 0. So it's going to be a horizontal line like this, and you're going to have m equals 0 or your slope equals 0.